when you look at the study from a number of years ago, and this is now being updated and the numbers will be bigger, but we had about 41,000 parking stalls in downtown in this area that you see outlined when the study was done. During the day, during the week, about 53% of those stalls were being used. Nights and weekends, about 46%. So different percentages, but always around that 50% and in different places in downtown. Well, when you look back to 1941, these are the surface parking lots that were in downtown Omaha in 1941. These are the surface and structured parking lots in downtown Omaha today. And so what you see is you see a lot of parking in downtown Omaha, and yet we feel like we don't have enough parking. What's interesting is if you compare the numbers in 1963, over 48,000 jobs, around 29,000 parking stalls. Today, a little over 27,000 jobs and 42,000 parking stalls. So we've essentially traded jobs for parking in downtown. Well, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of what other successful cities have done. So we started looking at other cities. We looked at Denver, for example. We had, at the time we did this slide, 41,000 parking stalls, now about 42. At the time we had 41, they had 44,000 parking stalls in downtown. But they had 123,000 workers in their downtown to our 27,000 workers. So we looked at other cities and studies that are out there. This was a study, looked at a number of cities, and in particular these 6. What they found was that from 1960 to 1980, they did what Omaha did. They added parking in downtown. From 1980 to 2000, 3 of the cities continued to add parking in downtown, like Omaha has done. 3 of the other 3 cities, however, built less parking and invested more in transit. So what was the outcome? Those that invested more in parking, not surprisingly, saw their driving continue to go up. But what is interesting is they saw their job numbers go down and their pay scales go down. Those cities that invested in transit instead of parking, again, not surprisingly, saw their driving really kind of level off. But they saw their jobs go up significantly and the pay scales really skyrocket. So what happens then in downtown Omaha? This is a recent analysis that's been done by the planning department. And in this analysis, we just looked at some blocks in downtown. And if you look at the 2009 downtown master plan, downtown 2030, it said that there was a market for probably up to 6 20-story office buildings in downtown between 2010 and 2030. So we said, well, let's just look at some sites in downtown. And so in this image, what you see is the blue is a maximum structured parking, about 8 stories of structured parking. And the green are the buildings that would go with that structured parking. So if you take these parking garages, this is how much office space would be developed to go with those parking garages. So then we said, well, what if we could better manage our parking? Make better use of it, because not all the parking stalls are being used all the time. We saw only about 50%. So what if these garages that were built, we did a better job of managing it? Well, you start to see the buildings get a little bigger. Then we said, well, we're going to have a BRT. What if we built the streetcar? What if we could decrease the amount of parking per square foot? Well, we get bigger buildings. So then we said, okay, well, let's take a look at those cities that we've been studying. Well, this is what would happen. Parking stays the same, but if you had the Kansas City parking ratio, if you had the Minneapolis parking ratio, and finally if you had the Denver parking ratio. And that happens to match the 2009 master plan. This is what we wanted to see in downtown, and this is where we started to realize back in 2009 that we couldn't get those buildings in downtown and continue to park the way we're parking. Well, the good news is we have had a recent market study that was done as a part of this planning effort, this alternatives analysis that Derek's going to talk about. And in that market study, we found we could bring back 20,000 jobs. We could basically bring back the jobs we lost in downtown, jobs that would be immediately adjacent to neighborhoods that need those jobs. At the same time, we found that we could add about 6,500 residents, and altogether it's about $2.2 billion worth of construction. So that's the good news. But the bad news is that when we tried to fit that into downtown under current parking ratios, we found it didn't fit. And all we could fit was about 10,000 jobs, about 3,000 residents, about $1 billion in construction. And what's really interesting is we spent about $500 million in structured parking in order to get that $1 billion worth of new development. And what we found in downtown, unfortunately, is that when we were able to get First National to be downtown, and they were great, they wanted to be downtown, UP wanted to be downtown, the city had to build that parking. So if that happened in the future, in order to get those 20,000 jobs back into downtown, we may have to spend $500 million to build parking for those offices. And then, of course, we're going to add a lot of commuters, so there'll be some additional traffic congestion